Are you saying that?
My favorite trick about being in a group like this is no matter what chaos is ensuing, if you ring a bell 3 times, everyone settles down. It's good. Wouldn't it be nice if life was just like that in general?
Yes.
You just ring a bell 3 times and everyone was quiet and ready to listen. So welcome everybody. It's nice to see you. Soryu will be here, but we were informed that he locked his keys in his car. And he's dealing with that, and I guess going to be a little bit late. So I know the theme for tonight is making enlightenment profitable, which is kind of a very controversial topic, especially in this world of things that Soryu feels very strongly about. And so I'll make no attempt to imagine exactly what he wanted to share with you about that particular topic. And so we'll wait for him to arrive, for him to get into the details about that theme. But we can just take this opportunity to just do some practice before he comes. So, welcome everyone. Kind of see him where you like. So take this opportunity to settle into your posture. And just take a moment to actually experiment and really question and ask yourself, are you comfortable right now? And is your spine as straight as it could be? So one way to adjust for that is to actually sit a little bit forward in your chair so that you're not leaning against the back. Although for some people, they might need to do that in order to take care of themselves, or it helps them to sit up straight. So you can answer that question for yourself. You feel your feet on the ground. Feel your connection to the chair. So once again, taking another opportunity to straighten up and then settle in. And bringing your awareness to your body. In particular, noticing the sensations that you feel inside your body. And in particular, paying attention to sensations that seem emotional in nature. And so often when we talk about subjects like power and money and profitability, it might be a whole range of different emotions that can arise. And so we can take this opportunity to directly feel how emotions are present in the body. And so at any given time, you might be aware of a particular sensation in your body that to you at this time has some kind of emotional flavor, emotional quality. And you are the judge of this. You actually can't get it wrong. And so if you're not sure, it's okay to guess. You have the sense that whatever you're experiencing right now, some kind of emotion connected to it. It's not important to label the emotion to know what emotion it is, or to consider the story that might be generating that emotion. But instead, pay attention to the direct experience of what does it actually feel like in your body. And if you'd like, in your mind, as you experience that sensation, you can use the mental label feel. Simply observing that emotion and allowing it to come and go. You might also be aware that there isn't any particular emotional content that you can identify at this time. And so if so, your body is in a state of emotional peace. And that state of emotional peace, the absence of emotion, is an experience that we can perceive. And so pay attention to that experience. And in your mind, you can use the mental label peace. And deeply experience that peace. And so at any given time, if you are experiencing some sensation in the body, you just have a sense, has an emotional flavor to it. Bring your attention to that part of the body. Simply allow your awareness to experience that sensation. In your mind, you can say the label feel. You don't have to look for emotions. If no emotions are present, become aware of that absence of emotion. You can use the mental label peace. And if your mind wanders away, notice how your attention moves from within the body, maybe towards a thought, either in words in your mind or an image in your mind. Maybe sounds around the room. Anything other than emotional sensations in the body. So you can simply release that experience. And do that by moving your attention from that experience back inside the body. And if it's helpful, you can use this constant stream of mental labels to make sure that that's what you're paying attention to. And so in your mind, you might hear, feel, feel, peace, 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 feel, feel. And noticing what are the nature of these emotional sensations. They may be present for a short time, for a long time, but eventually dissolves into peace. And there may be an experience of peace, and out of that peace emerges some kind of emotional sensation. And so allowing the emotions to come and go, and as well allowing the peace to come and go. And so sometimes we may have the thought that I am an emotional person, or I am not an emotional person. That I have a tendency to have these certain kinds of emotions. We can often identify with that emotional quality. And as we observe emotions come and go, noticing the very simple fact that emotions are something that happen to us. We're just sitting here. Nothing from the outside is stimulating us in any particular way. And yet, these different emotional flavors are just happening. And sometimes these emotions are pleasant, and sometimes they're unpleasant. But the question we can ask is, am I willing to experience this? Whatever arises, am I willing to have this experience? And simply allow that experience to flow through you. Rather than subtly resisting that emotion or wishing that you were experiencing a different emotion. But noticing that of its own nature, given time, will naturally come and naturally go. And if we happen to experience a state of emotional peace, the absence of emotion, we can ask the same question. Am I willing to experience this peace? Sometimes this state of peace can be uncomfortable. And so we want to generate some kind of content in the mind. A thought, an image, some kind of emotion, a combination. Simply because we're unwilling to experience that peace. And so in a moment, you'll hear the sound of the bell. And we're going to simply transition to a different kind of technique. So maintain your practice. But at the sound of the bell, if you want to do a quick stretch or adjust your posture, anything you need to do to make yourself comfortable, you can feel free to do so. And so when you're ready, finding again. Allowing your eyes to close if that's what's most comfortable. Remaining with your eyes open, holding a soft gaze in front of you. So the practice that we just did was a practice to forget ourselves. You simply pay attention to emotions that come and go, and the peace that comes and goes. And so we want to be able to link that experience to something that makes us powerful, something that makes us effective. And so in your mind, see if you can bring up a vision. You can use words that describe this vision. You can see a picture of what this vision might look like. In particular, a vision how you would like to make the world a better place. A way that you can actually use your current power, your current influence, to inspire others. Bring up that vision. Notice the emotional sensations that arise in the body. And in particular, pay attention to the pleasant sensations. And there may be unpleasant sensations that arise with this vision. Often when we think of how we'd like to make the world a better place, there can arise doubt, insecurity, fear. And so allow those emotions to be present. But notice that among those, there's also a sense of inspiration, a sense of hope. And so pay attention to those sensations, to the positive emotion associated with your vision. As you pay attention to those positive emotions, notice how that vision might change. Notice if we're holding on to that vision to have to look a certain way, to have to be a certain way. Momentarily letting that vision go, just paying attention to that positive motivation that was generated from the initial vision. The motivation that you feel in your body. As you pay attention to that, notice if a new version of that vision is allowed to emerge. Maybe in a way that is unexpected. In a way that you were not trying to create. It simply arises from that motivational feeling in your body to be of service. And trust that. And so the more we're able to let go of our vision, to let go of the way we think things should be, but simply just connect to that emotional motivation that inspired us to have that vision in the first place. Being able to feel that directly. And then out of that place, allowing an unexpected vision to emerge. And then making a commitment to act in accordance with that vision. And so Soryu has arrived safely, so we can welcome him to take that, and hopefully was in line with the general direction he was looking for tonight's activity.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was great. I enjoyed that. That was very nice. I locked my keys in my car at a gas station. It is pretty common practice for me. I do that 3 times a month. Difference was this time there was no hide key. The hide key vanished. So that only happens once every few years. But today was the day. So I think we have time to talk a little bit and then sit a little bit more. So thank you very much for that, Tyson. That was very helpful, very useful. I like to talk about feedback loops, and that last practice is a practice of structuring feedback loops in a very skillful way. We have a motivation to be of service, so we produce a vision of what that would be, how to be of service, and that impacts the felt motivation. And so we connect with that, and then out of that comes another vision. And as Tyson mentioned at the end, it's very important that we, in this kind of practice, an effectiveness or transformative practice, that we commit to, in this loop, a third component. There's the feeling that motivates a vision. That vision brings forth a feeling. It's important that we connect with that feeling in order to bring forth a clear vision. Having brought forth that clear vision, we connect with a feeling in our body, as he was saying. And in going through that process, each clarifies the other. Maybe some of you experienced that. The feeling was clarified to a certain extent, a more accurate experience of that motivation to be of service can be acquired, can be achieved. But there should be a third component there, and that is action, which Tyson mentioned very clearly. We commit to that course of action. That commitment to a course of action is very, very important, because otherwise mindfulness and life are 2 different things. And if mindfulness and life are 2 different things, then you're better off without the mindfulness part. Yeah, I mean, you can just throw that out and live. I don't think mindfulness ought to be something separate from our lives. Or to put it even more strongly, mindfulness is not something separate from our lives. So if you're practicing a mindfulness that's separate from your life, then you're not practicing mindfulness. This has to be our lives. And there's a phenomenon that a lot of people talk about nowadays. You might have heard of it. It's a very popular addiction, I guess we'll say. It's called the real world. Maybe some of you have heard of it. There's this thing called the real world. So the real world, just so you know, isn't. The real world is the constructed world. The thing that we call the real world is the most constructed thing in the universe that, anyway, I know of. It's very constructed. We made it. We human beings made it. And we feel very strongly about it. We hold to it very tightly. And that's why we call it the real world. We have to call it the real world, or else it wouldn't be a world at all. But because we believe it's the real world, it is our world. It's the real world for us. It's our holding on so tightly to that makes it real. And that's good to know. That's very important to know, because people won't be forgiving if we choose not to participate in the real world. We won't be humored. People won't put up with it. So we need to know that. We need to know that real world is something that is important to human beings, and it's very important for us to be involved in the creation of that world and the realization of this world. Which brings us to one of the most fundamental questions, I'd say, in modern mindfulness and the practice of mindfulness in the modern world. And that is, should mindfulness make you better at functioning in the real world? Should mindfulness be something that makes you more successful in terms of the real world? Now, this real world, as I say, is produced by the human mind. We made it. It's not in any way inherently real. It's a constructed choice, we would say. But it's a choice that we all make together, and we punish people who don't make that choice. And so we have to understand it to be significant. So we call it the real world. That world is made by the human mind because that world is based on human beliefs. People share beliefs. People hold together as a group to certain beliefs. We hold to that very strongly. And because of those beliefs, because of the shared beliefs, the world is the way it is. I've lived in many different cultures, and I can tell you that people do things really differently in different places. A lot of the things that in any given culture seem like the only way that things could be done aren't done that way in other places, and so we know with certainty that it's not the only way that things could be done. We hear in the colonial, we colonialists, and in particular here in the U.S., we have a certain sense of how things must be, but it's not the case. It isn't the case that things must be democratic, logical, massive, growth-oriented. These things just aren't how things have to be. And so that's pretty scary. It was hard for me as I went from culture to culture to come to terms with the fact that a lot of the ways that I thought things really are optional. But it was actually even more scary to realize that it isn't just, so sometimes we talk about descriptive and normative truth. So there's a sense of this is how things are, then there's a sense of this is how things should be. We talk about it, we can talk in those two ways. This is how things are, this is how things should be. So I thought this is how things really are, and then I went to Japan and found out, nope, That's not true. That's not how things are. And then I went to India and realized, oh, it's really not true. And then I went to Tibet and realized, oh, it's really, really, really not true. Then I lived on some Indian reservations and it's absolutely, totally not true. And you just sort of realize more and more that this isn't true. And then, and there are places where there are even more options than that. I've only lived in a very few cultures. It's even true just if you go live in different parts of the U.S. You know, New England is different from the South, which is different from you know, the Midwest, and California has its own separate universe. So there are a lot of different possibilities. Okay, that's weird, but you kind of accept it. What was even harder for me to accept, and for most people was even harder to accept, is realizing that there's different ways that things should be. Now that's pretty scary. That there are different ways that things are is hard to deal with, hard to swallow, but that there are different ways that things should be, that the way things should be is optional. This is terrifying and often can send us off into some kind of cultural or ethical relativism, in which case there's just no right and wrong anymore, and who knows what's going on, and I'll just resign myself to amorality. All of this is very confusing, that there are so many options. And so it can feel kind of relieving when there's something that everyone, at least in practice, agrees on. It's nice, you know? It's really nice when, at least in practice, in theory, of course, you go to some mindfulness group on Sunday evenings and people say that they don't believe in it, but their lives show that they actually do believe in it, so that's a great relief. It would be nice if there was something, some fiction, some lie that everyone agreed to live by. Wouldn't that feel good? We all know it's not true, but we're going to behave as if it's true together. That would feel really relieving, wouldn't it? And so that one thing, the most successful myth, the most successful fiction, the most successful shared fantasy in all of world history is money. Money has no inherent meaning, but we give it meaning. We all agree to value it. And we agree that if someone doesn't value it, then they should be punished. They shouldn't be allowed to flourish. And out of that firm conviction that we all live by, even the people on the Sunday evening sitting groups who may claim that they don't, if you look at our lives, you see that we do, in fact, believe in money. We fully support this myth, this fiction. And in giving it that weight, that wholehearted life energy, we make something called the real world. With that conviction that we share. I will, whatever I happen to do in my free time, on a regular basis, most days, most of the time, with most of my acquaintances, I will function in terms of money. I'll deal with my basic needs, and even with a lot of my most fundamental relationships in terms of money. And in that way, I'll give my mind and my life to supporting a fiction. You know, in the old days, you could at least talk about dollar bills. You say, look, this dollar bill is just a piece of paper. You can't eat it. You can't wear it. It has no inherent value, but we give it value. It's because we give it value with our minds that it has value. But nowadays, we don't even have that anymore. It's all completely, it's just data. There isn't even, you can't, at least the dollar, you could kind of wear it. You know, you could put it on your head and sort of you could wear it. You might not enjoy wearing it, but you could wear it. But you can't even wear it anymore. It's a complete fiction. It's just data that's stored somewhere. And for that data, I mean, really, it's for this data, for that fiction, we are fully engaged in the obliteration of all cultures that don't buy into that don't believe in it. We will destroy those. We'll kill you. We will. We won't hesitate to kill. Genocide is absolutely on the table as long as there are people who don't buy into this. But that we won't stop there. We'll end life on this planet as we know it for the sake of this data, the sake of this fiction. Now this is the real world. Now we're getting down into it. And the question is, good question. Should mindfulness help us to acquire power over that data? Meaning, save money. Right? And so that's why we ask. I really like the way Michael wrote it. How did you do it? Mindfulness, power, money. Which one doesn't belong? That's really clever. So mindfulness, power, money. Does one of these not belong in that group? Remember, this is in Sesame Street, if any remember that.
One of these things is not like the other.
No, that was one of my favorite parts of Sesame Street. I still like it, actually. I really like that part of Sesame. I like to watch that. You can find clips of it on the internet, and I like it because you can look at it and my way I like to do it is see that the way each one of them doesn't belong. You know, you just try to figure out other ways in which one of them doesn't belong. It's really fun. It's really enjoyable. And actually, this is another point. This is sort of a tangent, but tangents seem to be my specialty. What time is it? Just to have a tangent within a tangent. Nest tangents. Okay, thanks. Only part of my watch works. So some of those little lines don't work, so I have to. Sometimes I can tell what time it is. So anyway, okay. We nested. We're going to expand back out into the next nest, and that is different cultures actually understand these which thing doesn't belong in different ways. I don't know if you know. I'll just give you one example, and then we'll jump back out of this nest again. Maybe someone will still remember what the talk was about. There was another nest. That was one too. So we're going to get back to here now. So you have Western culture versus Eastern culture, so Asian culture. Let's say that you have an apple, a banana, and a monkey. Which doesn't belong? What do you think?
Yeah.
Right, right. So this is sort of a change of what sort of a thinker you are. So most Westerners would say that the monkey doesn't belong. Because we think, since Aristotle and co, we tend to think in terms of characteristics. Okay, so characteristics are to us most important. We're interested in characteristics of things. But in the East, of course there are characteristics, but what's really important is relationships. Relationships is really, and so in a group like this, you're gonna have a lot of people who, trying to expand out of their stuck Western mindsets. And so you all might be kind of interested in relationships too. So you might say the apple doesn't belong because there's a relationship between bananas and monkeys. But there's no clear, bananas and apples don't really interact in any particular way. Monkeys and apples don't really interact in a way. So the apple is the one that doesn't belong. Okay, interesting stuff. Different cultures see what doesn't belong in different ways. And we're deciding now, getting back out of the upper level again, we are deciding now whether money, power, and mindfulness get along with each other. Are these the same or not? Is mindfulness the sort of thing that ought to give you more money and power? And this is very confusing for me when I got back to the US from Asia. I got back, and one of the first things I saw was an advertisement for a meditation group that I was interested in joining. I had done some meditation, so I was kind of interested in finding other people who did meditation. At that point, I'd probably done, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15,000 hours of practice, of formal practice, and I wanted other people who had also done practice, and so I saw it and I read it, and the qualifications of the person who was leading the group were as follows: founder and CEO of 2 companies, one of which has had a consistent rate of growth of over 1,000% a year for the past 3 years. A very successful business person, extremely successful business person. Yeah, I'm certainly a multimillionaire. Who knows? Maybe by now he's a billionaire. Therefore, he's a qualified meditation teacher. There's proof. The proof is his business is succeeding over 1,000% a year. Right? Pretty impressive. Amazing. We don't know what happened. I mean, it was some kind of internet company, so maybe it just crashed and burned. Who knows? But maybe it didn't. Maybe he sold it for $100 million something dollars or more. Who knows? Therefore, he must know about meditation. Now, this is fascinating because this is an assumption. There's an assumption made here that mindfulness practice and making money are totally compatible. In fact, maybe equivalent. Now, this is a very interesting attitude. I appreciate this attitude very much. There's another attitude, which is that he does that makes it probable that he doesn't know about meditation. Right?
Kind of where I was leaning.
Yeah, right. So different people see this in different ways. And the thing that I believe is that this question is one of those questions that lead us towards simplistic answers are typically dangerous. And this is one of those questions that tends to push us towards a simplistic answer. And it's typically an emotionally simplistic answer. And those are the ones that we really have to be careful of. Because emotions, the strength of emotions is their richness. Is that emotion can carry an enormous amount of information. More than a sentence or an idea. An emotion can carry the richness of countless relationships interwoven together into one body sensation that holds all of that in one moment in a way that an idea can't. So it's dangerous when we find our emotions serving a simplistic perspective. That should be a real red flag for us. That my initial emotional reaction is not complex. Now that's something that we need to immediately wonder about. So is mindfulness and money, are these compatible? Should mindfulness make you more wealthy? Should a mindfulness practice make you more wealthy? If our reaction is a simple yes and no, especially at an emotional body level, then I would suggest that we need to examine this until there's a bit more richness in our response. That richness comes from seeing, on the one hand, that a deep mindfulness practice If it makes us more ethical, which we hope it would, we'll benefit the world more if it also makes us more successful. So if a mindfulness practice gives us an increasing sense of love, then it would be good if that same mindfulness practice gave us increasing power to express that love, to bring that love into the world in a way that truly benefits others. On the other side, we have to see that the significance of a deep mindfulness practice is ultimately in terms of letting go. Is ultimately in the experience of letting go. And so if the practice ends with acquisition, then the practice has been manipulated away from its most fundamental gift. So we have both of these points. But let's talk about a few more. Another is that a lot of people have a very confusing relationship with power and money, a very conflicted relationship. A lot of people deeply, at a deep level, want power and money. And so let's admit it, I bet a lot of us here do. Deeply want power and money. That's okay. It's okay if we do. That's reasonable. There's nothing evil about that. It's okay, so we want power and money. And let's be clear, it isn't like in some saintly way. I want power and money to make the world a better place. Of course that's there, but that isn't all that's there. There's something else there too. There's a fear-based or a selfishness-based, a greed-based, or even a hatred-based desire for power and money. That's there. Is that greed and hatred and selfishness and narrow-mindedness compatible with mindfulness? Now that's actually a very rich question. Because if the answer is simply yes, then mindfulness is worthless. Mindfulness is just selfishness and greed and hatred. Well, that's not good. But if the answer is no, then how could mindfulness have an impact on those things? It must be compatible, but it can't be compatible. Now that's the kind of an answer that's useful. That's an answer that has significance. Mindfulness needs to fully integrate with those things and purify them. But it can't just integrate with those things, or else it wouldn't purify them. Now we're getting somewhere. This is a significant exploration now. On the other side, a lot of us don't want power and money. A lot of us are really afraid of power and money. And not in some saintly way. Oh, okay, I won't have power and money, I'll just be peaceful and satisfied, deeply fulfilled in an unconditional sort of a way. That's there, okay, but that's not, as I say, all that's there. There's also an aversion. And in this kind of demographic, the kind of people who come to this kind of thing, this is actually very common. Mindfulness mindfulness ends up being used as a rationalization to make ourselves feel more comfortable with the fact that we're afraid to have power. That's very common in a community like this. People don't want power, and they want to feel like that's okay. It's okay that I'm afraid of having power. It's okay that I have a deep insecurity that I'm not willing to face. That's okay. I'm a mindful person. And that's why I don't want power. That's why I don't want to really have an impact, because I'm mindful and peaceful people don't have power because we just, I don't know what we do, smell flowers or something. And so it's fine. I'm going to enjoy smelling flowers, and that's mindfulness. So that's okay. It's fine. And then all those other people can deal with the problems of the world because I'm peaceful. So there's this sense of fear, of aversion to having power. If we imagine ourselves having power over someone, making someone do the right thing that they disagree and they hate us for that. A lot of us in this kind of group don't see that and feel really proud. We feel afraid. And so there's that complexity too. There's this deep underlying subconscious, pernicious desire for power and money that's in deep subconscious conflict with a deep subconscious aversion to power and money. And all that gets mixed together deep down within us. This deep attraction and deep aversion in deep conflict. Should mindfulness purify that? Is mindfulness the sort of thing that should deal with that? Or is mindfulness the sort of thing that should allow us to not deal with that? And we just say, that's too hard. I've got other things to do. This is the sort of question that I think we have to explore very carefully. Because as far as I'm concerned, the impact we can have on the world, the service we can do for the world, depends on the mutually supportive relationship between three things. And I call them wisdom, power, and love. We need wisdom to see clearly. We need love in order to be motivated to be of service. And we need power in order to live by that love that is informed by that wisdom. Those things working together are what allow us to be of deep service. Those three things, wisdom, power, and love, working together. And the challenge, I believe, is not to come up with a simple answer about whether mindfulness and power and money fit together. Anyone can come up with a simple yes or no answer to that question and then hold by it and belittle people who disagree. That's easy. Okay, so I think we're beyond that, to tell you the truth. We're a community that's more mature than that. That is an approach that is inherently self-limiting. That's to find simplistic answers. Our job is to take up those simplistic answers and accept them, embrace them, and see if there's a way to weave them together into an answer that embraces those answers. So that it stops being about, who believes what, and it starts being about mature beliefs themselves. And as we do that, as we mature those answers, then to me anyway, there's a much simpler way there's a more straightforward way of looking at it. And that straightforward way of looking at it is that we want to maximize the amount of power that we can have. And simultaneously maximize the amount of mindfulness, or you could say wisdom, that we have. And any way in which those two are in conflict, it's our job to resolve that. So let's say we're trying to be mindful, but we really want money, and our search for money is preventing that mindfulness from developing. Then that indicates to us that there's something wrong with the way we're going after that money. So something needs to be adjusted there. The problem isn't the search for money, but it is the way that we're going about it. If we want to do both, and we're trying to gather money and power, but the way that we're doing mindfulness is preventing that, then maybe there's something wrong with the way that we're practicing mindfulness. So we're attempting to maximize the influence, the impact we can have on the world, while simultaneously maximizing the wisdom. In other words, we're trying to maximize our ability to transform the world, while simultaneously maximizing our ability to transcend the world. Until we come to the point when we have a kind of happiness that is in no way dependent on the state of the world. Absolutely in no way dependent on it. So that everything in the world could be going badly, and we would still have a kind of happiness. There could be nuclear war happening, and we'd still have a kind of happiness. Still have a kind of happiness. And if we have that, then we can, at that time, be totally open to the unimaginable suffering that would happen under those circumstances and is happening also right now. Totally open to that. And accepting of that in order to motivate us to gain the power that's needed in order to do our best anyway in our place in the world to resolve those problems. So to me, the question is in finding the ways in which those are in conflict and then clarifying that very conflict. Meaning that sometimes it's the case that we're going about trying to achieve power in the wrong way, and sometimes it's the case that our practice of mindfulness is not complete. And those two end up clarifying each other. Each one is the criterion for the other. We end up being able to, we have a measure for our search for acquisition of power, and it's, you could say, righteousness, with our mindfulness practice. Our mindfulness practice is the standpoint from which we can observe our power and see if it's valid. And the power that we have is the standpoint, the criterion for the mindfulness practice. So the mindfulness gives us a sense of whether the power is valid, and the extent to which we can gather power is a way of measuring whether this mindfulness that we have is really something that's enabling us to be of service. So it ends up being, in my experience anyway, a very subtle, complex question that demands a constant stepping beyond our previous notions, a constant exploration, rather than an attempt to get a certain fixed view that will be right. So, with that, is it 17 now? Oh, 18. With that, let's just spend a little while now. We have just a bit of time to practice mindfulness once again. Take a moment to straighten up. Settle in. And pay very close attention to whatever it is that you're seeing or hearing or feeling. If you're seeing something, whether that's an image in your mind, a visual thought, or if your eyes happen to be open, then whatever objects are in the environment around you. Or if you're hearing, that could be a voice in your head, any voice, your own or someone else's. Or you might be hearing sounds in the environment around you. Or feeling, you might be feeling an emotion. You might be feeling physical sensation. Whatever it is, attend to what you're seeing and hearing and feeling right now. Pay close attention to it and know it for what it is. there any questions or comments on anything that we've done today, talked about, experienced? Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but when you led the first two meditations, and the first one was on feeling, and you said, I think you said, some may feel a resistance to peace. And is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious if you could go into that a little bit more, because I actually didn't know I had a resistance to peace, consciously.
And so when you actually did the practice, and I said that at that time, did you notice any kind of sense that you might have a resistance to it?
No, it just seemed like I went deeper into a peace.
And so that's wonderful, and which is why I said that some people may, and not everybody does. And you know, it's wonderful if you do, and it's also wonderful if you don't. There's an opportunity to work skillfully in either way. I mean, just, you know, kind of by example, maybe by a raise of hand, if you feel comfortable, did anyone notice that you did feel a kind of resistance to a sense of peace? You know, so a few people. And so something that might be interesting to explore is that when we do experience that peace, you know, what's the reason that we, you know, don't just stay there for a prolonged period of time? That there is something, you know, a thought or a different kind of emotion or whatever that comes up. Obviously, that peace wasn't compelling enough to hold our attention such that other things wouldn't arise. And so in that relationship, there's, you know, maybe at a more subtle level, to fully experiencing and staying with that peace. Does that make sense?
Very much.
And so does that resonate in your experience a little bit? You said that you did go deeper into it.
Surely, especially in my conscious day-to-day stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I resist peaceful times more often. But, thank you.
I have a question. At one point, I heard Soryu say that you find power as our ability to control somebody else and make them do something even if they don't want to do it. And I was definitely
Not exactly, but almost.
Okay, that's what I
Yeah,
heard. But,
yeah. Yep, almost. Pretty close.
So
That made you
I
uncomfortable.
always envisioned power as more of an influence,
Mhm.
and kind of even by just living day to day in a mindful way, we can have power and not necessarily controlling somebody, but having that influence. So I'm just confused with maybe I just heard what you do.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good way to put it. I think a lot of the time I use a definition from the social sciences, which I like to use because it tends to make people uncomfortable. So that's the kind of, you know, power that I use. You know, you don't want to feel uncomfortable, but tough. I make you feel uncomfortable anyway. And there's a use in that. There's a value in that. And that definition is that power is the ability to get people to do what you want them to do. Okay, so that's one definition of power that's sometimes used. I didn't come up with it, but sometimes I use it. And in terms of people, that people could also be yourself, right? You could have power over yourself. You could have self-control. A lot of times we call it self-control, self-discipline. So that's power over someone. That's the ability to get someone to do what you want them to do. It just happens that that person is you. Sometimes we believe that there's a real value in getting myself to do what I want myself to do. I know what the right thing is for me to do, but I don't do it anyway. So it'd be good if I had self-discipline, right? So I would ask, well, why wouldn't it be just as good to get other people to do what you want them to do? Isn't it egotistical and self-centered to think that the only person who you should have control over is yourself. If it's good for you, why wouldn't it be good for others? If you care about yourself enough to want to control your behavior, why wouldn't you care about others enough? If you want to be happy, why wouldn't you want others to be happy? So from a certain perspective, to not take control over other people is a selfish, narrow-minded view. What? So I bring all this up. It's not so much to kind of make a heavy-handed statement, because everything I just said, I could have said in a way that was peaceful and sweet. I could have phrased it all differently. I phrased it that way on purpose because I think that we don't explore these issues very carefully. I think that we get really caught up in certain views on this topic of power and control. Which I take really seriously. Because I'd suggest that one of the reasons that the status quo is so stagnant, so static, is that people like you, who have really good intentions, have been brainwashed to feel uncomfortable having power over others. And people who have much less concern for the state of the world don't feel uncomfortable with power over others. So what kind of a world do you end up with if the people with love are uncomfortable with power and the people with power don't have much interest in love? What kind of world do you get? Well, exhibit A. The real world. That's the one you get. Exactly. You get the real world, as we call it. And so that's why I'm trying to disrupt that status quo by asking people like you who really are interested in love, in compassion, and in peace on earth, and in your own life and in your relationships. I really want to ask you, what's up with that discomfort that you experienced when I said that? I just would want you to, I'm saying that way to get, not to make some kind of heavy-handed statement, because it's true, you have to figure this out for yourself. But in order to try to disrupt the patterns that I think we've been indoctrinated with. And so I think that it's very rare that a person is working to increase their skill in wisdom and love and power. It's much more common that one or even two of those are left out because there's the perception, a subconscious perception on the level that you're referencing, the felt level that you're referencing, that there's a conflict between them. And that if I was really a loving person, I wouldn't have power. I would want to ask ourselves about that. Is that true?
I mean, I believe it is good to have power, but in the sense that you're saying, I just don't know if wanting power over somebody in the sense that I want them to be happy and do what I think they need to be happy, it might not necessarily be what they need to be happy.
Exactly.
That's where the confusion lies, I guess.
Right. That's exactly right. That's the sort of thing that a person accomplished in love would say.
Yeah.
So shouldn't it be that person who has power? Shouldn't it be the person who has so much love for others that they doubt their own views? Shouldn't that be the person with power? As opposed to the person who doesn't doubt. Says, well, either I know or I don't care. I guess maybe it's good for you. I don't know. In any case, I'll get money. So I'll do this. A lot of people function in that way. Or I know what's right for you. I'm the one who knows. So I'm going to make you into my image. Are those the sorts of people who we want to have power? Or do we want the person who would say, well, but I wouldn't necessarily know what would be right for someone. I mean, I don't know. It's confusing, right? Which person should have power? It's something to really ask ourselves. So yeah, it's confusing. It's a challenge. It is confusing. It's not a simple pat answer, I believe. I think it's more about an investigation. Yeah.
I just wanted to explore the concept of power,
Yeah.
which I sort of have an aversion to, mostly because I don't like people with power over me.
Right.
But through the idea that you raised earlier about vision, and when we were doing our mindfulness, to call for the vision, and I'm sure it was different for everybody, but then there was the second step, that after you sort of mentally embraced that vision, there was a result, and result in a sort of a inclusion of yourself in the general picture. And that's what I found momentarily. And if you have that inclusion, then that is coming to power through the back door. In a way, I mean, it just and a believable way for me, because it just happened. Because you were one with, rather than the guy up snapping the whip.
Mm-hmm.
So then you could bring forth your vision of love and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's wonderful that you had that experience, and I think in some way what came to mind in the connection of Sierra's question is that in some way that's sort of the answer on one level.
Yeah.
That when it's confusing to know how others should be or what we want others to be, but if we can really let go of our idea of how we think others should be and connect to a deeper sense that actually includes our perspective and others' perspectives, then from that place of not our own opinions and ideas, there can be a vision that is inclusive and that actually is coming from the connection and relationship with others.
And I have you to thank for that, because you enabled a vision to material. I don't take credit for that or anything, but emerge.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Then this would be one way, as Taishan said, it's one way of talking about the direct experience of not finding a conflict between love and power.
And I would like to find that.
Yes, so it seems like you did to a certain extent.
Well, like so much didn't it emerged.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think it would any human.
Yep. And then that, I guess, now that you're taking it to that level, that then would be the confluence of all three.
That would be good.
Of wisdom and love and power. Because that wisdom is the sense of selflessness. The love is a sense of inclusivity. And the power is a sense that there's a vision, there's something to be done.
Yeah. And
in one moment you had all of those experiences in a way that they weren't conflicting.
And I was grateful for that, because I think that brings freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not busy fighting off what I don't think of this and that, want this and that. Thank you.
No. Thank you. Very useful report.
Put that thing away.
It's helpful except when it says either 41.
641.
Yeah. The top lines don't work. So I don't know, whenever it's a 1 or a 7, I don't know if it's a 1 or a 7.
48 or 6.
Could be answered.
No, it's just the top line. It's a digital watch, it's just the top line. Yes. Oh, yes.
What was somebody else that had?
Julianne had her hand up a little while ago.
I think she.
Okay.
She was-
Just gonna comment on something that's helped me. I used to study this stuff like sociology, like Max
Oh.
Weber and all this. That was
Great.
interesting for me to look at this different ways.
Yeah.
And when I was exposed to Kashmir Shaivism, they just bulldozed everything. It's like, well, everything's consciousness, so it doesn't really matter. Money, no money. It's all part of the consciousness
Mhm.
experience. Disease, famine, it's all there. So it's just a matter of seeing it as a facet of this bigger experience that we have.
Mhm.
And that takes all the struggle out of it. The conflicts just kind of dissolve, in my mind anyway, my experience. So there's rich people that, for lack of a better word, practice mindfulness, and poor people, and it's just not a conflict in that sense of the word. Just is what it is.
Mhm.
It kind of takes the weight out.
Right.
Also, I think, not maybe for me, for exploring this, but for people who might have that mindset, and especially in the United States, the Protestant work ethic versus, the Catholics, and each one in their corner, and then there's the Quakers who are all about simple life. They all have their opinions about what it means to be spiritual in terms of having wealth or not having wealth, and what you do with the wealth, et cetera, and it just kind of shakes that all up, and it becomes irrelevant. Like, spiritual path is your spiritual path, with money, without money, if you're aware of it, and then that's the key kind of what is going on.
Mhm. So then the challenge is to find, in your own experience, your spiritual path.
Your expression of that, yeah.
Mhm.
Moment by moment,
Right.
change.
Right. So someone could have one experience one day or year or decade, and then another at another time. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's very useful to get different perspectives on this. And to be with people who have different perspectives on it.
Yeah, I appreciate this whole conversation. I see this a lot. And there's, the spiritual camp, like, oh, well, I haven't bought a car for 15 years because I'm spiritual or something. It's like,
Right. Right. And so that could be true spirituality for someone, but not necessarily for someone else. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think there's different levels of awareness in that, taking on that role. Are you aware of why you're saying that this is how you define being spiritual? Where it's coming from? Is it something you were indoctrinated with, or grew up with, or et cetera, et cetera?
Yep. Great.
It's fun to.
Yeah, the exploration is very, very valuable.
So I don't remember hearing you talk about responsibility, and I often think of power and responsibility sort of going hand in hand. I was wondering if you could comment on that relationship between power and responsibility and love.
Yeah, great. Thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate it. A lot of the residents just looked at me as you said that. So I just answered this question a few days ago back at the monastery, so I'll say it the same way now. So sorry, all you residents who just looked at me, you're just going to get the same thing again. But if you take the pie, I think you could take the spiritual pie, right, and divide it up into some number of slices. Okay? So you could split up into just 2 slices. Just cut across the diameter of the pie, and you'd end up with 2 portions of the pie. And then you could say that's awakening and responsibility. Okay? So the awakening is the transcendent aspect of the practice. The responsibility is the transformative aspect. So transforming ourselves, transforming the world, transcending ourselves, transcending the world. There's a transcendent aspect and a transformative aspect. The grace, the faith aspect, which I think is probably better put grace aspect, and the works aspect. The wisdom aspect and the compassion aspect. The non-self aspect and the good self aspect, right? So you have these 2 different ways of looking at it, and those together make up spirituality, and that's a good way to divide up the pie. Very simple way. Another way is to divide it into 3 pieces of wisdom, love, and power. Now it's the same pie. You're just dividing into 3 pieces, so you get a little bit more specificity regarding the characteristics of each of those slices. You could divide up into more pieces than that, of course. Say 8, maybe. If you wanted.
Oh,
If you felt like 8, then 8 could work. You know, who knows? It could be anything. There's a big tangent that almost happened, but I don't think that's not going to happen today. So if you were to divide up into 3 pieces, then you get wisdom, love, and power. Okay, let's try to line up these 3 pieces with the 2 pieces. If you were to do that, then awakening would have a clear connection with wisdom. And responsibility would have a clear relationship with power. Okay, we want, in order to be able to take responsibility, in order to do things that make a difference, we need power. That's how it is. You need power over yourself, at least, and maybe over others. That's really important, in the sense, the ability to have an impact, to be able to transform the world. Then what about love? Well, love actually is equally connected to awakening and responsibility. It's out of the selflessness that we experience in awakening that a deeper kind of love can emerge than we had ever imagined before. And that's very important because that's how we cultivate, deepen our experience and ability to be motivated by love. But love has to be connected with responsibility, or else it's just power. And power without love is a problem. It's not good. Power is not inherently good. It has to be made good. It has to be purified and directed by compassionate concern. So the love ends up being equally connected, you could say, to awakening and responsibility. Both awakening and responsibility have their own kind of love. If you wanted to say what kind, then you could say awakening is what brings forth unconditional love, and responsibility is the manifestation of conditional love. Does that make sense as a difference? So if you, let's say you're in a relationship with someone, you could have unconditional love for them. That's very healthy. Have unconditional love for that person. You'll love them no matter what. They can hurt you and you'll still love them. They can hurt others and you'll still love them. There's unconditional love. They can help you and you'll still love them just the same. They can help others and you'll still love them just the same. That unconditional love doesn't change according to how they behave. That's very important. It's very, very important to have that. But I don't think it's sufficient. It's necessary but not sufficient for a good relationship. There has to also be conditional love. Conditional love means if they hurt you, you're going to respond to that and not love them in a conditional way as much. or maybe walk away from them, end the relationship. That's conditional love. Conditional love changes according to conditions. According to how that person behaves, you'll love them in different ways. Unconditional love doesn't change. And a lot of the time we get lost in unconditional love, and a lot of the time we get lost in conditional love. And the two are needed for the other to function appropriately. Both are needed for the other to be appropriate. That means that if someone treats you well, then you treat them better too. If someone treats you badly, then you step away. You respond to that in your behavior. So the love, then, if you wanted, you could divide it up. And now you have 4 pieces of the pie. If you wanted, you know? And you can keep on doing that. You can keep on dividing it up if you want. And in that way, we see that it's very useful, I think, to do that because you start to understand the different characteristics and relationships within this practice. So was that a useful analysis of those categories?
I'd like to hear the tangent, but
It's funny to watch it come and go.
No, there was no way to fit it in.
Right.
It was going to be a discourse on various ways that world traditions have divided up this path. So that's it. That would not have taken the 2 minutes that we had.
Stay tuned for next
Maybe. And yes.
I just had one brief question. You mentioned a couple of times indoctrination, but and then in the beginning you mentioned about how you lived in the different places and they were what was right here and was right there. Now, would you say that in all those places they were indoctrinated in different ways?
Yeah.
You would. So we've all been victims of indoctrination, of subjects of whatever.
You could say victims or subjects. I was very happy to be indoctrinated in those ways. I was just listening to a podcast recently that I'd like to talk about at some point, in which someone claimed something that I really disagreed with, which was that people don't like to experience domination. I totally disagree with that. I think people love to experience domination. I think people love to be dominated.
Do you also like that?
Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying, that when I was in those cultures, I really liked to be indoctrinated.
Oh, I see.
You know, I like to have my mind dominated and manipulated, because in allowing that to happen, I could see the vast potential of my mind in a way that I could never have done on my own.
You must have been very free to start with, to, you know, relinquish to another.
I would say that something that's a little strange, but I think in most cases, say that people like to be dominated, but in general, the extent to which we are dominated in a healthy way depends on our self-confidence.
Self-confidence?
Yeah, so to the extent that we're self-confident, the way that we're dominated is good for us.
I see. It's a privilege to be self-confident in a way, because you've been, not you, but we benefited from circumstances that have allowed it to grow.
That's right, such as being dominated.
Oh, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah. So when we're really dominated, when we're subjected to something, I say, or victimized by a certain worldview, and we learn to flourish in that, then we see, oh look, my flourishing is independent of this indoctrination. Wonderful. So in that case, I am in a certain way free of this indoctrination, even though it is still happening and I can now use it. If we resist that, though, then we actually lose the opportunity to gain that kind of deep self-confidence that comes from finding out that. So when we're indoctrinated, we gain things that we didn't want, which comes back to your point,
Yeah.
and we lose things that we did want in our own minds. And so we discover, look, my happiness, my flourishing, my well-being isn't dependent either on what I want and don't want. In fact, it isn't even dependent on my mind. Now that brings forth an enormous self-confidence.
Yes.
But then we become a colossus in the human world.
And can you work that idea of vision into that, once you get rid of your mind business, which we, the vision emerged out of the mindfulness.
Mhm.
So mindfulness, you know what I'm saying?
Mindlessness. Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But can vision persist in there if you experience a type vision like you mentioned in this first talk? Sorry to point.
Janet?
That's okay.
Yeah.
I think so.
I hope so. Yeah.
Well, you just proved it does.
Maybe I am. Didn't mean to prove it, it just happened.
Right. That's the proof.
Well, thank you.
That's the salient characteristic of the proof.
So
If you
that's
had meant to prove it, it wouldn't have been a useful proof.
right, and so maybe you can have confidence in that kind of proof.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Is that you realize that in giving up to something beyond yourself, you flourish more.
Yeah. A lived
And-
experience.
Yes, and that's why indoctrination and being dominated is so useful. Because it allows us to open up to something greater than ourselves that we didn't want to open up to.
Oh, I see.
If you only open up to something greater than yourself because you want to, then you're still trapped by your own desires. You're still trapped by your own basic worldview. But when you're forced to open to something greater than yourself, then you're functioning according to a wisdom greater than that you've already been indoctrinated with.
Okay, thank you.
And it's very exciting.
Yeah, it is.
It's really inspiring. Sorry, can't do it. So now's the time to talk about responsibility. What can we do so said in the next few minutes to make the world a better place in the coming few weeks? What can we do to be of service? Yes.
Urgent need for blood at the Red Cross Blood Donation Center.
Thank you. Yes.
Wednesday, there's a lobbying at the State House for animal welfare,
Mhm.
and you can, I'm actually going as part of CML. And I don't know if it's too late to register, but I assume that people can show up anyway. And it's 1 to 6, and actually you meet with the senators and representatives from 4 to 6. But they
I don't-
teach you how to do it.
I actually don't think you can
You
go
can show up
anymore.
Okay.
I think that they cut that off, isn't that,
Okay.
isn't that correct?
Well, on the website, so it's through the Humane Society, and it's a lobby day that they originally wanted people to register for. On their website, it says that registration is now closed. So I would say that if you're passionate about it and you want to take a gamble and you don't have anything else going on Wednesday at 1 p.m., maybe show up at the pavilion. It's also listed on the Humane Society website with addresses. You could show up. I think they would be wise to take you as a representative, like, hey, the more the merrier is my opinion. They might turn you away, but you could go. That's the way I would look at it.
I mean, it's an open event in the sense that if you want to go lobby, that's when it's open, you should be able to. You might not be able to do it under their logo, that's all.
That's right.
And then maybe just go 4 to 6 or something.
There's an organization that's taking any kind of used clothing, tarps, plastic, medical supplies, toothpaste, whatever, to go to the refugees, Syrian refugees in Europe, and just go to their website and you can fill a box up and send it to one of the distribution centers. It's very small network of people doing this, but they're making a huge difference. It's amazing. And it's called newdaysyria.net, nudaysyria.net.
NU,
NU,
NU's,
NU, daysyria.net.
same thing. No,
No,
Day,
New Day.
New Day.
but new is spelled and you.
I'm sorry, I was gonna bring this thing and I forgot. I can write it down for you.
Okay, so, and shared a couple others. The Peace and Justice Center will have a presentation on Saturday from 3 to 4 on child slavery and human trafficking in the cocoa industry. And there's also a Climateers winter mixer from 6:30 p.m. to 10, sponsored by 350 Vermont and Rising Tide. That'll be at the barn on February 5th.
Climateers is a new term.
I guess so.
Climateers, I like it. I like it.
Where is that?
The barn.
It's the barn.
It's a long barn.
The barn.
The red one.
It's probably a red one.
Yes, very Okay, it is, again, Friday, February 5th at 6:30. And the barn is 255 South Champlain Street.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an actual physical barn or if it's a venue called the barn. Oh, okay, so it's a bar or something called the barn.
It's a kind of party to meet other people who are Climateers.
Yeah, yeah, it looks fun. It says, it's a midwinter gathering to celebrate the cold, different, and rekindle our revolutionary spirit. There's going to be DJs, a cash bar, music, dancing, conversation, a lively conversation. Yeah.
So there would be good to do something or something like that about the climate. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's 30 degrees above normal, and it has been this winter. This whole winter's average so far just under 30 degrees above normal. We're supposed to get a nice warm rainstorm this week. It should be in the 40s this week. Typically, it's in the single digits this week. So we're almost 30 degrees above, quote, normal, and normal is defined as the average over the past 30 years. But the average over the past 30 years is not normal. That in itself is already an elevated temperature. So this is something that, just so you know, whenever they talk about average, they mean average over the past 30 years. But that's an average that is not normal. So, so please consider life on this planet and the actions that we can take to be of service to especially the most helpless, who will be the most victimized by this terrible injustice that we, especially in our nation and in our culture, have produced. So, do something fantastic and fun, like going to the barn and having a lively conversation. Yeah, so tonight we're gonna do some